Alright, y'all boys, we back with another Jujutsu Kaisen Fans and Parade video, and today we're going to be doing a tier list regarding the global side when it does release, right? So, we're going to be covering all the characters. Of course, you'll notice that there are some characters that are here that aren't going to be in the global release. Of course, I will not be putting them on the list if they are not going to be out at the release. So we're just going to be talking about the ones that I know of that are actually going to be at the release of the game. I'll give like everything a time frame within the month, right? Within the month of the game actually releasing, right? So let's start off with Maki. So Maki is kind of like that character who doesn't have any cursed energy. You can just use her freely, super flexible. Problem is her damage output isn't that strong. Now, on the JP side, they are buffing some of these older characters. Now, of course, on Global, we do not know if on Global she will be having those buffs straight away at the start. So we're just going to assume that they will start off the game with the characters just how they are when they dropped on JP. Just because I feel like if they start trying to balance out things early on, then later on you might diminish the value of other characters' needs, right? Like needing the other characters, and then you might not want to pull on them because you'll have these characters, and it will just be like a net loss for them, and they won't really gain too much profit. So I kind of feel like they'll have the characters at base. So we're just gonna go start off and say all these characters are gonna be just how they were on JP release are gonna be on global release, right? Without any other buffs implemented just yet. So we have Maki, like I said before, she doesn't use curse energy. She's very flexible, but her damage output is very lackluster. She definitely goes into the mech category, and you don't really see too much play from her whatsoever. There's going to be some SRs that are actually very nice, but we're just going to drag in the ones that are really like valuable, and we'll skip over the other ones because the other ones you probably won't build out until later on, right? And then, of course, we'll be covering the SSRs. Next up, we have Megumi. So Megumi, he's definitely usable. He does have a stun in his kit. I believe it's the owl. Yeah, I think it's an owl, or it might be a hawk or an eagle or whatever the hell it is. But his Shikigami, one of his Shikigamis do inflict a stun, which is very nice. But you do have to invest a lot into the skills, so that way it's a higher level, so you have a higher chance of actually stunning the enemy. Without it, it's like it's very RNG, so you kind of have to play around it a little bit. And his damage output really isn't that crazy. On top of that, you have to use his ultimate, like his special skill, to actually access the better parts of his kit, which is, you know, he summons, he fuses all his Shikigamis into the big black wolf one. I forgot what it's called. But, you know, he fuses his wolves and they turn into the big one, and, you know, a lot of his kit changes from that. But other than that, he just really doesn't have too much viability or use, especially him being blue. There's another superior blue character out there, so the use for him is just mainly for his stun, but there definitely is better characters that do stuns, and you probably won't even be using him all that often. But he definitely is better than Maki, so he will be inusable. Next up, we have Nanami. So Nanami, he actually, in the beginning of the game, I actually believe he's a really decent character for DPS output, especially for green. His kit revolves around overtime. That's the biggest issue and drawback with him. So I would like to say that he's good. He can crit. He has crit damage. The memory that comes out with him as well. Like, he does have a memory, and his memory does increase crit rate and crit damage, I believe. So that definitely plays into his crit factor because you want him to crit. And he does more damage if he crits because that hits their weak points or whatever. One of his passive is practically overtime, right? And, you know, after 9 turns, which is the biggest drawback of his entire kit, after 9 turns he will get increased damage and all that stuff. That's the problem with his kit overall entirely. He's usable, definitely doesn't have to think much. He's a good DPS, but there's just significantly better DPSs. If you need a green, he's usable there. But other than that, he doesn't have anything unique to him aside his overtime, and it just has a really bad restriction with being over 9 turns to get that damage output. And if you're trying to beat things, you realistically don't want to take 9 turns because, I mean, if the content is difficult, then you will take too much damage, and yeah, you kind of just aren't going to win with him. Next up, we have Panda. So Panda, he's in a very tricky situation. So overall, his kit is, he's a tank before he goes gorilla mode. So when you use his special, he goes gorilla mode. And in gorilla mode, he ends up turning into a bruiser type character. And the biggest issue with this is that his damage output isn't that crazy compared to other characters. But other than that, he's not providing anything else aside being a tank. If you're doing plenty enough damage to kill the enemies, then you don't need a tank, right? So the need for him is very low. I would say just him being a tank probably gives him a little bit more use than Nanami because there's plenty of DPSs and not too many tanks. But overall, he's just good. Like he could be so much better. He's just good. Another big issue is when the game started, he had curse issues where you not even on the first turn you couldn't even really use your taunt anyways. So you would have to wait a turn anyways, and that kind of gave him like a diminishing value as well. So they did change that. Of course, they did buff it, and they gave him a little bit more, lower the cost of the curse. I believe it was. They either lowered the cost of the taunt, or they raised the amount of curse that he starts with, cursed energy. But other than that, he's just not that good, especially at release. You're not gonna find too many uses for him aside if you just need a tank. He's the only like realistically decent tank in the beginning. Although you do have an SR character who is also a good tank, but you know, it is what it is. Next up, we have the OC. He is actually amazing for an SR character. I wouldn't say he's like one of the best, but he definitely does have his utility and uses, providing ways for survivability. So I definitely like this character a lot. He's not that bad whatsoever. You use him a lot. Obviously, when global release comes, I'll go into more depth into the SR characters, but he definitely deserves amazing, if not top end of good, right? Then after that, we have her, right? Now, she's a good character. I don't use her too much, so I cannot realistically rate her on this tier list too often, like that much, because I really don't know where she places. Like, I've still been using her, but I just don't know how I feel about her, so I'm not going to really rate this character. So we're just going to move on, right? Next up, we have Nobara. So in the release of the game, she's actually going to be meta. The reason for this is we do not have a lot of the hard hitters just yet. We have only a couple hard hitters, and she definitely is one of them. She basically stacks nails onto the opponent, and based on how much nails you stack onto the opponent, the more damage you do when you use your ultimate, paying homage to the actual characters, like, you know, abilities and stuff in the series. So I like how unique they make the characters in the game. They all kind of have their kits revolved around what they actually do in the series. You know, obviously, you know, cursed energy, you know, him, he uses the shikigamis, and then you have, and he has used all his skills use different shikigamis. He can go beast mode, and then his whole kit changes, and then you have Nanami, who has overtime and then does more damage. You the weak points as well with his crits, and then you have Nobara with the nails and doing more damage if they have nails. Very, very good. She's going to be a very good and very strong and very powerful single target nuker. Of course, later on she'll fall off to probably amazing when more characters that are DPSs that can do AoE damage at a higher ceiling than her come out. She'll definitely fall off a bit, but overall, in the beginning of the game, she's definitely OP as hell, so she's definitely going to be on there in the top. Next up, we have Yaga, the principal. He's OP as shit. I'm not going to lie, he's meta. He's practically meta. He's a support character. He increases the damage taken onto the enemies, right? So, I mean, you literally can't lose there, and he also provides support. He just does a bunch of debuffs to the enemy and is very good supportive for your actual team, and you're just going to use him a lot. And he has, like, no cursed energy issues or anything, so he always has, like, cursed energy to be able to do whatever you need whenever, and his passives are very nice as well. He's definitely meta, and he will continue to remain meta all the way until, you know, where JP is currently. He's still meta character, so keep in mind, he's probably the only character in this entire list that will age the most and the best, because he's one of the best supports. Next up, we have her. She is just a healer. I'm just gonna say usable, right? So you could just use her. You're not gonna have too many healers in the beginning aside from her, so you can use her if you need heals. Yeah, that's about it. She's just a healer. She's the only one. That's the only reason why I'm putting her on this list. Then you have this character. So this character I'm going to put amazing. The reason I put this character amazing is because she does have some... I believe she has evasion. I could be mistaken. But the biggest factor in her kit is the fact that she can stun enemies. And it's a very high chance. Like, I think it's like 90% chance you will be able to stun enemies. She's so helpful when you're doing the boss stages. So that way you could get the free-to-play memories and then some medals for the Phantom Medal exchange, so that way you can eventually exchange for Jogo or Hanami. So she's definitely amazing. She'll fall off later once you get better DPSs, where you probably don't even need to stun as frequently, and there's obviously going to be better SSRs that stun later on in the future. But as for the global release, she's definitely going to be an amazing character, probably above him, because I feel like you would probably use her more than you'd use him for his survivability capabilities. Next up, we have Junpei. Junpei is absolutely meh. His kit on paper sounds good, like, you know, he could do poison, he has good, like, he has damage reduction for himself and stuff like that, but the poison just doesn't do enough damage. He doesn't do enough damage. His tanking or whatever, you just don't really need it. He's just not really used that often. In fact, I wouldn't even say he's mad. I'd probably say he's bad. like you have like almost no use for him, but would be generous enough to give him meh, right? Next up, we have Gojo. Gojo is meta, and he is still meta to this day in the game. That's practically how the list is going to be right now. Gojo practically his biggest drawback is the fact that after 7 turns he leaves the battle, so this does count as you losing a character. So when you're doing stages that losing character is not an option, if you want to complete the condition, you're probably not going to want to use him unless you know you can beat it in 7 turns. Luckily for you, he does have a memory that does fill up his special gauge, and you'll be able to use it at least 2 or 3 times. That's not even the part that makes him, good, like using the special gauge or any of that. That doesn't point out anything. The thing that makes him good, even despite the fact that he leaves after 7 turns, is the fact that this guy is practically invincible to everything. He cannot get hit. He dodges everything. He's invincible. He's practically invincible until the 7 turns are up. On top of that, he does insane damage. He has a self buff, like he has a stimulant skill, so that way he can buff his damage. And his ult is an AoE nuke. It does so much damage, it's insane. He's basically Nobara, but AoE and invincible. And if you use his memory, then you basically can use it multiple times in the fight, right? So it's just he's just overall an amazing character, and he's never going to fall off a meta just because he functions so different than the other characters just by the fact that he cannot get hit or take damage, right? So he's practically invincible, so he will always be helpful in any piece of content that ever releases in the game. Next up, we have Inumaki. I'd like to say Inumaki is useful in the beginning when you need someone who could break, but then falls off drastically. On top of that, whenever you use any of his skills, he does take damage. I mean, relatable to the actual series, when he uses his power too much, eventually he hurts himself and he has to use the spray thing or whatever for his throat. So he is a bit iffy. He does prevent the defeat for one of your teammates. Like he yells stop and then they won't kill the teammate, but it's only once per battle. So you won't find too many uses. I guess like when you're doing like the boss stages, you can find a little bit of use out of him because one of the boss stages is weak to yellow, so that does give him a little bit of value there. But other than that, he's kind of a break character. He kind of heals himself a little bit. He prevents a death one time. That's the only thing that's unique about him is he prevents a death. He does do some debuffs to the enemy as well, but they're not anything crazy, not anything on the scale of Yaga. He just doesn't have too much use. I'd say he's just usable, right? I'm not going to give him too high score. Now, his other part, this one is amazing. I would go into detail about it, but like, bro, he's just absolutely insane. This guy, he does it all. He can reduce all damage for your entire team by 43% if you have it at max for 2 turns, right? That's insane. On top of that, that same skill, Protect, also fills all allies' ultimate skill gauge by 213. I believe it's 1,000 for a special gauge, so that's about a fourth of the special gauge. And he sacrificed 12% HP, but that doesn't really matter. The fact that he can reduce all damage that you take for your entire team and give your entire team ultimate gauge so you can spam your ult faster enables Gojo so hard that just gives him so much value. On top of that, he can stun an enemy too. If you max it, it's 156% chance, right? So even if they have some resistance, he still has a very high chance of still stunning them. He's insane. He is absolutely insane. Just for the stun alone and the damage reduction and the ultimate fill gauge. The ultimate fill gauge is the best part. But just because he can do all that utility, he's just one of the best characters in the game. And even to this day, he's very much used. I'd say he's meta, right? But like, I'm gonna say amazing, right? Because even though he provides all those buffs and utilities, he doesn't really do too much damage. He's good there, though. He's good. He enables the rest of your team. I just don't want to put him as meta because he can easily be replaced by another character whose main role is utility. But he's definitely up there. He's still viable to this day on JP. Next up, we have Todo. So Todo, he is good. He's just a good character. The biggest issue with him, especially for global release, is the fact that he wants to be paired up with a character that uses taijutsu, so basically like melee attacks and stuff, because he does buff the character that's behind him, their melee attacks. But he is pretty powerful in the fact that his boogie does allow him to swap places with his partner, which is the person behind him, and counter the enemy. So practically your teammate has a chance of not getting hit and he can counter that enemy, right? So it's pretty nice in trying to avoid damage for a specific character. But you don't really see too much use out of him unless you're a Todo fan. He's definitely usable everywhere in every piece of content. It's just he's not meta, right? He's just good. He's just good, right? And you have to pair him up with a taijutsu character, otherwise his value diminishes because he buffs taijutsu damage to him and the person behind him, and then that gets on to the next character. So the next character is this Itadori. So this Itadori, he was pretty powerful at first, but then once people kind of figured it out, he kind of fell off immediately. So he does good damage. You want him to initiate his black flashes. When he hits his black flashes, that's when he does a tremendous amount of damage. But when he's not hitting those black flashes, they're like another factor of crit. When he's not hitting those black flashes, he's not doing enough damage. Luckily, he does increase his rate of black flashes, which is very nice. And he does have a memory that does cater to his black flashes and critting and all that. And then on top of that, if you do pair him up with Todo, then I'd say that they're amazing, right? In the beginning of the game, at the start. But just alone, he's just remains amazing, and Todo remains good just alone, right? You kind of have to, in order for him to be good, amazing, you would have to have Itadori as well. Next up, we have Hanami. Hanami is an amazing support character, providing all sorts of utility in the game. I'd like to rank him amazing. This, we're not going to get this for a while, so I'm not going to talk about that character. Same with this character. Actually, we'll probably talk about this character, but let me just talk about the other ones. So now we have Jogo. He's the other Phantom Grade character. He is a DPS character, very decent. Realistically, though, you won't have him at the start anyways, so I don't want to kind of really put him in there. I'll just keep him in notable mentions, right? Probably misspelled it, whatever. He's notable. I'm going to put him there just because you just don't know when. Same with Hanami. I don't even know why I put it up there, but if you could have her in the beginning of the game, she'd be an amazing. And so would Jogo. They're very good. They're probably top end good, but they're definitely very nice for free to play characters. So this would be the tier list on release. This is practically what you got to be going for. These are the 3 characters that you're kind of looking for. Like I said before, keep in mind she does fall off later, but these 2, they do not fall off. They last forever. They last forever. I mean, there's another version of him that's SSR that's really good, so you do get him. That's also nice, but this one is not bad at all. And this Gojo is not going to fall off because he's invincible to damage. GG. And then, yeah, she's going to fall off, so. But this is basically how I would rate the tier list. If they do not make any of the JP changes that we have, like any of the JP buffs, and they just keep it base as if it was like the start of the game, like JP, this is how the tier list is going to look. So, yeah. Anyways, that's all I got to tell you for today. I had thorough research on a lot of these characters. I mean, minus like the SR characters, but a lot of these characters I've used, and that's where I would rate them. And these are the ones that still are relatively used today in JP. So it's like, I'm telling you from experience. Of course, he will fall off as well, but like realistically, these 6 right here, they are still gonna have uphold value until later on. Anyways, yeah, appreciate you guys for watching. I know it was a long, dragged out video, but I kind of like to talk a lot, and I just want to give as much information as possible so nobody's misguided, right? So appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.